Okay, now everybody should be able to hear us. Say hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll give it a second to see if anybody else pops in here. I can see that we are live at least. Good. If you are jumping in here or you've shown up, please drop a comment. Let us know that you're here. We need to know that people are here today. Hi, Sheila. Scott, say hi, Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi, Judy. How are you guys doing today? Seconds away.
Hopefully they got some questions because I only got one.
That's okay. We will make it through. Okay, good. Sheila says she's doing great. She's baking and listening. Okay. I can't wait to try whatever you're baking. Right? Baking and listening. What kind of things are you cooking up today? Let's really sit here and wait. Same rules apply. This is open-ended Q A time. We can talk about anything that comes to mind or anything particular, or you can sit back and listen to me ramble and try to cover an hour's worth of stuff. Cakes, and more cakes. That sounds really fattening and delicious all at the same time. How about you, Judy? How are you doing today? What are you up to today? Or Scott, what have you been up to today?
I've been up to nothing, but I do have a question for you.
You do have a question for me.
Yep.
Okay.
I know in our discussions outside of church and when we're here during the week, we've talked about the opening where the, I guess, Jews or at least the Mesopotamians, whoever, thought that the gates to hell were somewhere in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And even the Satanists they have spells or something, and they go to this spot. So apparently there is something that tells someone that the gates to hell are in this region.
Okay.
Where is that, and what do you think the significance is?
Well, there's multiple views on this as far as the gates of hell goes. So the first one would be the natural view of like what Jesus would use as hell. It's a word Gehenna, and it's actually a valley that's literally right on the outskirts of the walls of Jerusalem, where kind of the trash, it's sort of like the city dump area. And during Jesus's time, it would be a place where they would bring the trash and then they would light it on fire, and it would be basically an everlasting fire. Like, it would basically be a valley that was on fire at all times, burning down trash. So Jesus is going to use these pictures that are going to be pretty familiar with the ancient Israelites during the time to kind of paint an idea of what an everlasting, eternal, desolate fire would be. However, in the Bible, when it talks about the gates of hell, like for instance, when Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he turns and he asks that famous question, "Who do people say that I am?" He's actually in a place called Caesarea Philippi, which actually, let me see if I can pull this up real quick. At Caesarea Philippi, it's on the northern edge of Israel, kind of like around Tel Dan area. Let me share my screen here. Chrome tab. Hopefully this will work. Yes. Okay. You're not going to be able to see this very well. But in Caesarea Philippi, it is of this place called Mount Horeb. Not Horeb. I'm sorry, that's Mount Sinai. But Mount Hebron. Haran, Mount Haran. I can't think of the name. I think it's Haran. Anyways, in this map, you can kind of see northern edge of Israel up here at the foothills of this Mount Haran. This is a significant place. I know for you, Scott, being a fan of Enoch and stuff, First Enoch, you're going to recognize this mountain because it's the mountain on which in the non-canonical books of Enoch, it talks about the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6 that came down. This is the mountain that they came down from to the world, to the earth. But at the foothills of this mountain, there are ruins of these various temples, and they were pretty fascinating temples. Temple to Zeus, the temple to Pan, and the temple to at the time Caesar Augustus. So people from all over the world would come to these temples, and they would worship these pagan deities, and the deified humans and Greek and Roman god Zeus and Pan. And Pan, this is a really fascinating rabbit hole we don't have to go down, but he would be the equivalent of what we would call Azazel in the Bible. So if you read Leviticus 16 and your Bible says during when it's talking about the scapegoat, most Bibles will have a little subtext that you can look at or click on, and you'll see in that Leviticus 16 passage, the scapegoat it's an unknown actual Hebrew word, and some Bibles will just transliterate it, and that's Azazel. He'll transliterate this Hebrew word to Azazel. Well, anyways, Azazel is the god or goddess or whatever you want to call him, little g god Pan in Greek and Roman mythology. He's the god of the wilderness, sometimes depicted as half goat man type individual. But he had a temple here, which again you can't see unless you're looking at my screen. But he had a temple that backs up to the cliffs. These cliffs that are right at the edge of the Mount Haran. And if you see it today, you'll see there is a massive opening and like a cave here in the back of where this temple was. This cave is actually it's closed off now, but it used to have waters that would come out from it from the melting of the ice caps on the top of the mountain. It would flow out from there. Streams would flow out straight from there, and the people or the pagans in the time would come and they would sacrifice goats to this god Pan, this god of like fleshly desires and these kind of things. They'd throw the goats down into the water, and ultimately, if the goat would float back up, it meant that the god of or that Pan basically rejected this sacrifice. And if it went under, then it meant that he accepted this sacrifice. And they would do this a couple of times. They would throw a goat in. If it rejected, it floated back up. They'd do it again. And then if it didn't work a second or third time, then they would begin to do it with children. So they would take children to this place, and they would throw them in the water and sacrifice them to the god Pan. The mouth of this cave became known as the gates of Hades, the gates of the underworld, the gates of hell, which is why when Jesus is standing before these three massive temples where all these people from all around the world would come and worship both human deified individuals and Greek and Roman gods and goddesses, Jesus is going to be looking at these temples and watching this sacrificial system, and he's going to turn to his disciples and say, "Who do people say that I am?" Which is where you get, some say Elijah, some say, a new prophet, and then, Peter's going to answer Jesus is going to say, "Who do you say I am?" And Peter's going to give his answer, "You're the Son, Most High." And he's going to say the gates of Hades will not prevail against this. The gates of hell will not prevail against this church. Upon this rock, basically Jesus is showing his authority here, looking at this rock, this foothill of this mountain that has this gates of Hades. None of this is going to be able to stand against who God was, and so who God is. And so today, my guess is that what you're talking about with regards to Satanists and using, these areas particularly for their own rituals and stuff. I'm guessing this is just their way of sort of spitting in the face of like Christianity and what Christians believe as far as what hell is and that kind of thing. But it doesn't mean that there's a literal or figurative gateway to hell located anywhere on this earth, just like there's not a literal necessarily gate to Eden that remains on this earth either. In fact, the Bible says all over the place, it kind of ascribes this to many places. And we've already looked at two here as far as Gehenna outside of Jerusalem, the gates of hell at the foothill of the mountain at the northern Israel. But in Revelation, which is actually really, really, really significant today now for apocalyptic literature, like end times literature, it says that the river Euphrates will dry up. And when it dries up, that there's four angels or fallen angels or whatever you want to call them, four heavenly beings that are imprisoned under the river Euphrates that will come out and will ultimately destroy a third of the world. This is significant because, actually, let me share my screen again. This is really significant because if you do a quick Google search on the river Euphrates, it's up here, you'll start to see we'll do news here. One day ago, twilight of the Tigris, Iraq's mighty river is drying up. Euphrates is at risk of drying up 8 hours ago. 1 week ago, again, same thing. Bodies of the water all over North America are drying up as well as over there in Euphrates. You can see there's massive talks about how the Euphrates is drying up. And it's really interesting because they found all these ancient civilizations underneath where the river used to flow, and so they're kind of archaeologists are really enjoying it because they're getting to dig into places that they haven't for 3,000 years have not seen the face of the dry land. But it's just interesting because the river Euphrates seems to be drying up, which seems to be another place that something is imprisoned, supposedly, depending on if you're taking a literal view of this. And so gates of hell, if you're asking me where the gates of hell are, I think that they are figurative places and used as pictures to help us understand some of this, but I don't necessarily think that they are, literally going to be in a certain geographical location, if that makes sense.
But who was it that believed that the gates to hell are there?
Well, that's just what, like the people who were sacrificing to the god of Pan, that's what they would claim this to be. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether or not that came from Greek and Roman mythology as far as that goes, or if this is just because such awful things took place there that it got the reputation as to be the gates of Hades. I'd have to do more research on that for sure, but I think it's really interesting, and it's quite stirring to stand there. We've been there a couple times now, or I've been there a couple times now in my trips to Israel, and it's really interesting to stand there at the foot of this mountain and see these ruins, where all these people would come and make these sacrifices and that kind of thing. I couldn't imagine standing there in a time where it was actually still continuing to take place, and why that reputation would have stood. But yeah, it's a pretty jarring place. But also one of the myths that we should dispel as well is the fact that I think Christians use the term hell more loosely than sometimes the Bible does. Like, for instance, it may say something like the gates of Hades. Well, Hades is more along the lines of Sheol, as far as the Hebrew word Sheol. And Sheol did not mean hell. It meant the afterlife, the life that took place after you died, after you were buried. And so that could be various places depending on what your views are as far as Christians go. Heaven and hell situation. Heaven and hell aren't exactly what we claim they are at the moment either, because if you read Revelation, the new heaven, new earth and stuff has not has not yet come in the new kingdom. And so wherever the believer is with Christ right now, but it isn't what we would consider the whole streets of gold and pearly gates place and that kind of thing. Same deal with hell, because we see at the end of the judgment day, you'll see the names are read out, and then they'll be cast into the lake of fire, which we would call hell or Gehenna, or whatever. If that makes sense. It's confusing. It's I don't think we're going to fully grasp a lot of this until one day when we are in the presence. For us to live as Christ and to die as gain, right?
Is there any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, well then I got another one.
Okay.
All right, so I'm reading a book called Giants, and it's again, it's talking about the sons of God, and it's mentioning that all these Jupiter and Neptune, all were actually sons of God that were living on Earth. I don't know if this was pre-flood, probably pre-flood, and if it was pre-flood, where they got the information that these giants actually lived. But what's your view on did these Zeus and all these people actually, were they on the Earth? Were these is that your view, or do you think this hyped up nothing?
So the two views all are dependent upon your belief on the Genesis 6. Whether the sons of God in Genesis 6 are actually heavenly beings, or whether they're, the godly line of Seth. My personal view, most of my life, my personal view was that I had no idea what this was, because most of the time I had read right over this and never even paid any attention to it. Once I read it for the first time with new eyes and was like, what is this passage? Then it kind of set me on a journey for several years trying to figure out what is this passage. And I had read that I had read the two views as far as that they were either the godly line of Seth, or they were basically fallen angels. But I still didn't quite understand it until I read Dr. Michael Heiser's book, The Unseen Realm, where he comes at it he starts in Psalm 82, which talks about these sons of God, the sons of the Most High, who are part of this divine council. He attaches it to in Deuteronomy, when at the Tower of Babel, he splits up the nations according to the number of the sons of God. These are the same sons of God in which he's placed over the nations to keep watch, what Daniel would call the watchers. They're the watchers that brought the decree for Nebuchadnezzar to go beast-like for a while. And then once I started to see all that, then it made sense. Everything's kind of started to click, so that these sons of God were these heavenly beings. I stress saying heavenly beings rather than fallen angels, because again, I think we use fallen angels too loosely. I think angels in the Bible are always seems to be more of messenger type beings, but there's also the seraphim and the cherubim, and there's just different. There's in one story in Kings, there's this spirits that speak, and there's just, I think there's more going on in Sheol and in this life that we can't see than simply saying just angels or demons or fallen angels. So if you take that they are heavenly beings, they are called Elohims in the Bible. They are called gods, which makes sense because, for instance, Psalm says that God is the Most High God, and oftentimes it calls them the Most High God. Well, that would be a meaningless statement if there weren't other Elohim for him to be Most High over. Psalm 82 or Psalms 86 or 89 says that the sons of God were also there when God created the earth. And so they were the first part of creation that it says that they let out the scream. Job says this as well. And so we get really, really itchy as Christians when we start talking about this, because the immediate assumption is that by believing that these were gods, little g gods, it makes us feel like we are believing in some sort of polytheism. That's not the case. The case is that the Most High God created the sons of God, right? Created these lesser Elohim. However, the lesser Elohim were clearly a part of his divine council. God, just like he does with humanity, he partners with humanity. He partners with his divine counsel and are given them tasks. We read this in Genesis chapter 1 when it says that he places the stars in the heaven, in the skies, the greater light, the lesser light, the sun and the moon to rule, to have dominion over those heavenly realms, which is why most times in Scripture, when it talks about stars, they're actually being deified. They're always talked about the bright morning star, like they're basically, in a simple English way, they're calling them the shiny ones. It's not that we believe that the balls of gas that are up in the sky right now are actual divine beings, but they are heavenly representations of divine beings. And so if you were to have divine beings that God has placed over these nations, and he has taken Israel himself, well, depending on how much they're able to be a part of these nations, then you can understand how you begin to get ancient religions, such as in Egypt with all of their deities that they've created and that they have worshipped over time, such as the Romans and the Greeks mythologies, and such as ancient Native American cultures and South American, Central American cultures all had these deified beings, a lot of which share similar qualities, and almost all of which their rulers claim to be descendants of, which, if that were true, then what you read in Genesis 6, when the sons of God came and had children with the daughters of men, these were known as the mighty ones, the men of the name, the men of renown. These are the giants. And we have no problem believing in the giants because we read David and Goliath 1,000 times. Well, the point of David and Goliath and the point of the Canaanite conquest, if you go back and read Joshua, was not that God was interested in a genocide of a bunch of people living in the land that's supposed to belong to him. It's that all of these people, all of these clans were descendants from this, from a heavenly and earthly rebellion. So we've got a bunch of messed up bloodlines, messed up genetics, which causes them to be giants, which causes them to rule this world, rule this earth with like the iron fist. They're also the ones who, in that book of Enoch, are claimed to have brought certain high technologies, such as like how to create weaponry, how to create jewelry and makeup, which sounds silly until you begin to realize that once you can make yourself up and make yourself more beautiful than somebody else, or make yourself more powerful than someone else, or you can now build stronger and more fortified cities, and your giants, you can rule whatever you want. You can have whatever you want in this world, especially when your rulers claim to be descendants of gods. So you begin to start to see all of these stories that you're hearing across the world begin to fit into a biblical worldview that really kind of ties together a lot of these loose ends of how do we have so many different religions, and how come they all have tendencies to, worship multiple gods, and that these gods a lot of times would have children with humans, and these human kids would end up being these strong and mighty powerful ones like Hercules or whatever. And it was all about power and having great fortified nations and cities and that kind of thing. So does that make sense? Did I answer that question? Went on a rabbit hole.
Well, yeah, I think so.
And if you are joining us, I can see some people are writing in here. If you have questions or want clarifications about any of the stuff that we're talking about, please just interject at any point. I'll get to them as soon as I breathe. I'm just fascinated with learning about the heavenly beings. What was the name of the book, Scott?
Giants, and then I think it lists Genesis 6. Is it 6:4?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yep.
I will. I'm going to finish it. I haven't actually finished it, but in it also talks about when you were talking about makeup, and they were big on birth control. The giants were, because the women, they wanted them to stay young and beautiful, so they gave them makeup, and they didn't want them to have children, so they had come up with all this birth control. So
Yeah.
they didn't want them to widen up after they've had dropped about 3 or 4 kids.
Interesting. I threw in the chat here. If you would like more or you're interested in more of this, Michael Heiser has released several different books on this, but his book Supernatural is sort of like the Spark Notes version of all of this. It's amazing. Like, you should read it. There's an audio book. If you don't want to buy the book, if you search on YouTube, there's like 1 billion videos of him actually going through all these books or these views, and it's really eye-opening. Especially when you get to the point that Jesus says that it's going to be like it was in the days of Noah, when the end and sudden destruction and all this stuff is going to come. When you begin to look at that, then you have to question, okay, well, what separates the days of Noah from all the other times in the historical setting? It wasn't that they were just drinking and giving in marriage, kind of like what he says, but it's the only time in the Bible in which you're seeing this incursion of heavenly beings showing up and trying to have children or messing with the genetics of humans. And when you look at that today, it seems so strange, but not really out of the realm of possibilities, considering we are constantly trying to manipulate our genes today in the science realm. You can be any gender anymore. You can choose genders. You can manipulate children in the womb if they are seen to possibly have a genetic defect of some sort, and then add to it, if you want to go down a really weird conspiracy, what the world would call, what we would call heavenly beings, the world could easily call aliens, alien technology. I mean, UAPs and UFOs and stuff get really strange and weird, but they are very much in the front of most government, excuse me, most news agencies these days, as not so awkward or weird. And so that's a rabbit hole we don't have to go down. But I just don't think, I think we have a tendency to separate ourselves from the weirdness of the Bible when realistically, I don't think we live in a world that's that far removed from the weirdness of the Bible. We just we're just seeing it through different eyes than maybe they were. So anyways, we don't have to get into that.
But when we're talking about these sons of God were here, it was pre-Noah.
Yes. But it says that, well, I'll just go to it so everyone can see it. Genesis chapter 6. If I go to Genesis chapter 6, let's share my screen again. It says, when man began to multiply, okay? When man began to multiply, when Adam began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them. This is a big deal because the blessing that God gave Adam and Eve were to be fruitful and to multiply. So we're reading this from fresh eyes. We're reading this and seeing, okay, good. When mankind is multiplying, is being fruitful, they're doing what God wanted, right? The sons of God, and we have daughters of man. So we have a compare and contrast here. Sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. Now, this is a clear callback. If you're in the Noah class or the Jonah class, you're going to recall that the writers are drawing, using specific words and phrases to draw off of previous stories. So if you're reading this and you see when the sons of God saw that something was attractive and they took. So we have the saw, that it was attractive, and they took. Immediately you're thinking the Adam and Eve narrative. You're going to see that Eve sees that the fruit was desirable for gaining wisdom and that it was attractive, that it was beautiful, and she took it, and it ends in death. Immediately you're seeing that pattern, so you can read that pattern back into this. You're going to see that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and you're thinking, oh no, this is not good. And then they took for themselves wives, any that they chose. And immediately you're like, this is not going to end well. Last time we saw this, it ended in death. Then then the Lord said, my spirit's not going to abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days will be 120 years. Now this feels, I don't know about you, Scott, but this feels like a hard right turn right there.
Anita just texted me and said we're frozen.
We are frozen.
That's what she said.
Let's see. Are we frozen? Can you guys see us?
Maybe just our computer.
That's gonna help us. I can see us moving. I don't know.
Maybe it's just our computer.
Oh, not for Lauren. It's not. Yeah, tell her to refresh it maybe. Or Anita, if you can hear us, refresh. Anyway, so if you're reading this, you're getting something about daughters of somebody, sons of something, taking, and then it goes to my spirit's not going to abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days are 120 years. To me, this feels like one of those like right turns. Why did God just suddenly talk about his spirit dwelling in man 120 years? If I asked most Christians, most of them would answer that this is because men lived like 900 years back then, which is accurate. So if he's limiting it to 120 years, the question you have to answer then is how come there are people after the flood that live past 120 years? So we're not, that doesn't quite drive. Another view is that there's 120 years until flood takes place. This is probably maybe the most popularized views in scholarship, is that he's basically saying, look, my spirit's not going to abide in man forever. He's flesh. So they've got 120 years basically. Or also, if we're talking about offspring of a eternal, heavenly, immortal being with a mortal human, then what would their offspring be? Would they be immortal? Would they be mortal? Would they have a spirit? What is this? What is this thing? So you could look at it like, okay, well, here's this offspring. God's going to set boundaries on this. My spirit's not going to abide in man forever, or will not contend with man forever, for he is flesh. His days will be 120 years. In other words, to me, one of the other views is, okay, whatever this offspring is going to be, it will last 120 years. It's going to get 120 years, like a lifespan. Then it moves into the Nephilim, which is a transliteration from the Hebrew word. Some automatically translate it as the giant were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards. Also after what? After what do you think, Scott?
Flood.
The flood, the very next thing that's going to take place. Also afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man and they bore children to them. These were the Gibor, the mighty men. The Gibor. You're going to see this word played on a lot in the rest of Scripture. You're going to see it. You're going to see Ruth is called a Gibor, or Boaz is called Gibor. He's going to be called a righteous man, a Gibor, a mighty man, a Gibor. You're going to see Ruth is going to be called this, but in a play on words. You'll see the Nimrod, the founder of Babel, is called a Gibor. Ishmael is going to be called. He's going to become a mighty hunter, mighty with a bow, a Gibor. And we just got out of Judges, and we called. Oh my goodness gracious, his name just slipped my mind. The first judge that we talked about. Gideon, thank you. Gideon is going to be called a mighty man, a mighty warrior, even though he's going to be nothing but, not mighty at all. You're going to see Gibor all the time. So they were the mighty men of old, the men of, and it's literally the name, the men of the name. Now this to us doesn't mean much, but in ancient Babylon, which is when they believe this probably was edited, redacted, however you want to look at this, the men of the name in Babylon was a big deal. This was an honor. It was basically like, was it Leonidas who was 300? The 300, I think, King Leonidas, whatever. It'd be like that. If you were to say King Leonidas, he went out, he fought for his nation, his country, and ultimately, if you died in battle like that, then it would be like your name was being elevated up. So the Gibor, the men of the name, and it was almost like a power that the ancient Babylonians and ancient Mesopotamia would use. They would worship the name of these individuals. We still do this today, just in different ways. But this is basically where you're seeing like civilization become, majorly corrupt. Now, if you read this particular passage, we read this most often like God is angry at how sinful everyone is, which he is, and he just decides to wipe out the earth. The thing about reading it like that is that the Lord sees that the wickedness of man is great in all the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continuously. Okay, everybody sees that. We're seeing this as an outcome of what we just read up in the first part. And then this angry and vengeful God says he is now regretful. He regrets that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Right? Now, excuse me. If you're in our Jonah class, this regretful is going to be a word that you'll recognize. It's that second usage of to relent. It's nacham. So he nachamed. He's looking back in the past. He nachamed that he had made man on the earth, and it grieves him to the heart. And so to see that God's going to say, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds in the heavens, for I am nacham, that I have made them. Now we read this story like it's this angry and wrathful God who wipe all of the evil people off the earth. But the problem with that is, how do you justify this angry and wrathful God trying to wipe out this earth with the fact that he's regretful and that he's sorry? That he nachams, right? He wants to bring nacham, which will be comfort, but he can't do that because everybody is regretful, evil. Well, if you continue to read, there's this really interesting verse that I think changes how all of this is viewed. So you have to kind of justify, okay, God is wrathful and angry and wants to pour out judgment, but also is sorry and he's regretful. So you're seeing like this contemplation between the two. You're going to get the generations of Noah. This is where everyone's eyes glaze over. Noah's a righteous man, blameless in the generation. This is exactly the way that they will describe the sacrificial lambs when it comes to making atonement. There's only like 3 people in all of the Bible who are going to be called righteous and blameless, spotless, basically. The Tamim and the Sadiq. These are important. He walks with God, which is a callback to what we just read 2 chapters before with Enoch. Enoch walked with God all the days of his life, and then he was not. God took him. And you're like, wait, what? Okay. So Noah has 3 sons. They're going to come back and play here in a little bit. But then it's going to go back to this. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight. We just saw that, right? And the earth was filled with violence. Okay? The men of the name, just think about it. They are leading the trees. They're killing people, violence, and death. And then it says, and God saw that the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. There we go. Repeat it again. For all flesh, that's man and animal, had corrupted their way, earth. Okay? Had corrupted. This is shachat. This is they have begun to destroy or ruin or decay their way on the earth. And God said to Noah, I am determined to make an end of all flesh. Now there we go. There's that angry, wrathful God saying, you know what? I've determined to destroy everyone, right? That's how we've always read it. That's how I always read it. Except in your Bible, you may see there's a little arrow thing. If you click on that arrow, the literal Hebrew says, the end of all flesh has come before me. So I just want to pose this question to you. Did God look down at the evilness of all the world and go, you know what? I've determined to end all flesh. Or did God go look at his creation that has corrupted their ways, and they have now reached a point in which the end of all humanity has now come before him? Well, if you read this literally, the end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with violence through them. Behold, I will destroy them with the earth. For years and years and years and years, I read this story. Like, God got angry at us because we were bad people and decided to flood everybody out. Until I slowed down and began to look at the passage and started to read the little subtext notes and stuff. what has happened now is that translators of these Bibles who do amazing jobs, they've made an interpretation, which to me, I have determined to make an end of all flesh reads different than the end of all flesh has come before me. This is something you have to work out. This is something that you should spend some time meditating on, praying on, talking to God on. But I've always had trouble with the fact that the beginning of the story says that every intention of man's heart is evil continuously, and yet the end of the story ends with the same thing, that God remembers them. He's on the Mount Ararat. At the end of it, Noah builds an altar. He gets off of the ark, right? He builds an altar. Every clean animal. He somehow knows what he's doing when he creates an offering before Leviticus is ever even written. Noah somehow knows how to build an altar and offer clean animals. And then the Lord, pleasing aroma, and he says in his heart, not to Noah, but in his heart, I'm never going to curse the ground because of man. For the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Never again will I strike down every living creature as I've done, while the earth remains, seed time, harvest, cold, heat, winter, and all the days. So basically, what now is all the other people are gone. God took it upon himself to decreate a people who were already destroying themselves and start over with Noah. Noah gets off the boat and does everything right. And God then makes his covenant and says, because now I know, right? Because of man, for every intention of man's heart is evil in his youth. This is that inclusio. This is that book into how it started. Every intention of man's heart, right, was evil continuously in Genesis chapter 6. So the reader questioning, but Noah's wasn't. And Noah was called blameless and righteous. And so what does this mean? What does this mean? Was this all for nothing? Because to me, it sounds like it was almost all for nothing if it ended the way that it started. And so that's where you're left wrestling with what's happened here, right? And what you see in the 40,000 foot picture, if you see it in this viewpoint, is that something occurs in the times of Noah in which mankind, along with fallen heavenly beings, have manipulated maybe their genetics enough, have ruined the seed of the woman, which you'll recall from Genesis chapter 3 is a big deal. The seed of the woman cannot be corrupted, right? And if it is, then how is it's no longer the seed of the woman anymore. That's the seed of something else. And you're going to see that alongside extra Second Temple literature like First Enoch, excuse me, you're going to see that this divine knowledge of how to build weapons and create metallurgy and build fortified walls and make beautify themselves and all this stuff. These are all ways that people are going to begin to use to elevate themselves, to create Babylons, to create Russia to China. These massive mega structures in the world that will be used to bring on death and destruction. And at some point during Genesis 6, God looks down and he sees that the end of all of humanity, all of life, has now come up before him. And so God takes it in his own hands and decides to decreate, to recreate and restart through the waters. It becomes a picture of the theme of through the waters. He'll bring new creation into new life. And then for Jesus to then say, it will be like it was in the days of Noah. And that becomes very interesting in a world in which we are constantly trying to genetically modify ourselves, with, transhumanism, if you've ever heard of that. That's where man and technology combine to create superhumans, basically. Then you've got, genetic manipulation with genders and where you don't see genders anymore and all this kind of stuff. I mean, all of this, to me, it's not that far off for me to believe that we could attempt to manipulate our genes or genetics enough that we don't even realize we're going to die. This is why a lot of Christians had a big problem with the vaccine. I'm not going either way with this necessarily, but a lot of Christians had a problem with this, not because they believed it was the mark of the beast or something. Some believed it could be a precursor to it, but there's a sect of Christians that believe that by taking this vaccine that we were allowing a manipulation of genes, which is what they think that this certain sect of Christians believe is the mark of the beast. It's a genetic manipulation, not so much like an implanted chip or something of that nature. And so to me, I just feel like we read these narratives that have occurred thousands of years ago, and realistically, when we put them in through the eyes of 2022, it's not really that far off. I'm just saying, if an alien showed up tomorrow, I would have something in the Bible that clearly explains what's happening, especially if that alien is coming and is saying like he's here to save us from ourselves or bring us some sort of high technology, which is a whole nother rabbit hole we won't go down. But yeah, anyways. So there you go. Genesis 6. So much comes out of Genesis 6.
Somebody asked me about what the book was that I was.
Yes.
I'm going to put that book in the library. It's Giants, and I think Stephen Quayle is the one that wrote it. I'm also going to put The Unseen Realm and probably Supernatural in the library if anybody wants to pick those up, and that's by Heiser.
Yes.
All of those are excellent.
I'll pull this up and there you go.
The other one, what was the one about the book the guy's kind of reaching a little bit?
Yeah, I don't remember that one either.
Something about Nephilim. I've read it, and the guy's reaching, in my opinion.
Giants by Stephen. Genesis 6, Giant. Stephen Quayle, is that?
I'm going to have that in the library.
Okay, there's a couple of them here. Tim Alberino is also another author. He just popped up on here. This is one of the ones he's talking about. Genesis 6, Giant Master Buildings of Prehistoric and Ancient Stations. That's it. But this is Stephen Quayle is the author that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then the one I'm talking about is Mike Heiser, Supernatural. This is his more
like Reader's Digest.
Yeah, Supernatural is like the Spark Notes of Unseen Realm. Unseen Realm is his like his theological, like doctrinal dissertation type work. So it's amazing. If type that likes to read academic papers that have like footnotes and stuff on it, like you'll really nerd out on it. It's really good. But Supernatural is more of like average consumer type version of this, and so it's very, very interesting. And honestly, it filled in a lot of blanks for me as a Christian, trying to figure out how this all works together. And to the point that, for instance, demons in the time of Jesus, demons were not seen as fallen angels. Demons were the half-breed spirits of the Nephilim, these immortal/mortal beings, giants, the men of the name. When they died, they became the demons. They became what Jews during Jesus' time would attribute to demons. It wasn't until much later when we began to view the fall of Satan and the fall of the fallen angels as those became demons. But again, I think it becomes too simplified to just state that demons are fallen angels, because I think that it makes sense that these demons, which are disembodied, oftentimes, for instance, why are demons not ever really mentioned in the Old Testament? Has anybody ever really noticed that? What you see is unclean spirits mentioned a lot. Well, what made somebody unclean during the time of Jesus? It was touching anything that has to do with ultimately death, right? A woman who's menstruating, or an unclean animal, or blood, and these things that have to do with death create things that create uncleanliness. Now, if you have a half-bred immortal/mortal being who lives and exists within a mortal body, then that means that this immortal being is now, or this immortal spirit is unclean. And so it is part of something that will eventually die, which is why they're called unclean spirits in most of the Bible rather than demons. And so
I think I mentioned this before, but in Revelation, there's a time where the demons that are in prison will be loosed upon the earth, and Apollyon, which is figurative for Satan, will be their leader.
Yes, depending on which views of the end times and stuff that you take. Yeah, that's what it seems to be saying. Yep. Which is also why the Euphrates that seems to be going dry. There's some interesting stuff with that. You kind of go, I don't know what this means. What is happening? Any questions online? This has been an interesting discussion.
If the Euphrates goes dry, it also opens up the plain of Armageddon.
Yes.
Which allows the forces of evil to come across the riverbed.
Yes. Yes. That's what it says here in Revelation. It says that the sixth angel who had a trumpet released the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. The angel pulled on the great river Euphrates, and it is dried up to prepare the way for the kings from the east, which is interesting too. So, great river Euphrates is going to be a big deal in the in the book of Revelation, and so do with that what you will. Times, but boy, what a time do we live in here. What a time that we live in. Anybody else online? We've got a few minutes left. Have any thoughts, questions, anything that you'd like to add to this discussion? Excuse me.
Are they asleep?
I don't know if they're asleep as much as the 20-second delay plus typing time, plus if you're Mary, she'd have to pull over at the next stop sign, and or if you're baking and you have to make sure not to burn those cakes, that's way more important.
But I'm like probably everyone, when they read through that on Sons of God. I'm a son of God. Since I'm a Christian, I'm a son of God.
Yeah.
And I've always read that, okay, well, they're talking about me.
Yeah.
But it can be. When they would not have, if they were talking about the Sethite view or whatever, why would they make the comment about took daughters of men as that? They wouldn't have made that comment unless that was unique, because every human takes another human as a wife. Yeah. But it just wouldn't make sense.
Now, for me, I'm biased towards the Sons of God being heavenly being view. But there are people who are so much smarter than me that do hold to the Sethite view. And so for me, it's not necessary for you to be a Christian to believe that the sons of God were heavenly beings, or Elohim. B'nai Elohim is the Hebrew. You don't have to believe that in that sense. That's okay. Like, you can believe that they were truly just the godly line of Seth. It doesn't change anything to do with who Jesus was, what he did for us, our fallen nature, any of that. Me personally, though, I think it fills in a lot of blanks that I've always had with regards to different religions and how, how Satan, who we ascribe to be Satan, the devil, Lucifer, how it just fits a lot of those pieces together to me, I think. So
also, you said that God, he had no choice but to rid the earth of this. If you take the view of the God, the sons of God have made the bloodline impure, he had no choice but to get rid of everything.
there's a lot of themes that fit together there with regards to both a heavenly rebellion and an earthly rebellion. With regards to Sodom and Gomorrah, are the inversion of the Genesis 6 scene, where instead of the sons of God, heavenly beings coming and raping women, basically, you've got the men of Sodom and Gomorrah demanding to rape heavenly beings in Lot's house. With regards to why Jesus had to be born of a virgin, why it was presented to Mary, and her response was, "Be it unto me," as opposed to the Holy Spirit taking. It was an offering that Emmanuel would come through Mary, and she responds with that, "Be it unto me according to your word." Um, it just fits so many of the patterns. The see and take thing, the seed of a woman will crush the serpent. Well, if you are the enemy, if you are the serpent, a fallen one, then the best thing you could possibly do to I think, delay the inevitable is to try to mess up the seed of the woman, right? And the seed of the woman's blessing was to be fruitful and multiply. They're given dominion and rule over the earth, whereas the stars in the sky are given dominion and rule over the sky, but never given the blessing of be fruitful and multiply. So for them to come and to take the heavenly blessing from God to humanity and to corrupt that, it fits into the scheme of what, the antichrist, the anti God one would be and do. And so I think there's to me there's too many puzzles that I never found satisfying, but it's not necessary for you to believe the sons of God were heavenly beings. I think that's something you have to kind of work out within your own heart and mind, between you and God. If it becomes a stumbling block for you, then it doesn't matter. Move on from that. But if you're like me, it became okay, now that makes more sense. Like some of these stories that I've struggled with, that seems the Canaanite, the wiping out of the earth in the flood and the Canaanite genocide have always been really sticky situations when it comes to Christianity, until you realize that it wasn't God being vengeful and wrathful, but taking control of a creation that had already gone too far now and leading to death. And the Canaanite conquest was not about a genocide, but about removing the corrupted seed line of the Nephilim, of the giants, which created the giant clans. Remember what Joshua said? We were like, or Number says that we were like grasshoppers in the eyes of these people. Because if you think about it, God told them over and over and over again, don't marry the Canaanites. Don't marry the Canaanites. Don't marry the Canaanites. And what do? Marry the Canaanites. Meanwhile, God's trying to come through the seed of the man, right? And so marrying the Canaanites is corrupting that bloodline and seed line. And God's going to constantly be like, you are the mighty ones. Those aren't the mighty ones. Those ones that Babylon are going to use as the reason why their empire is so grand and strong and renowned is because of these men of the name and their descendants of the gods. And the Israelites are going to say, no, this created death and corruption, and this was bad. This was not good. The things that you use to brag is genocide, is actual genocide, is actually killing people. And so, anyways, yeah, I just think it's something that can be, it fills in a lot of those blanks. And so if you're online, you have any questions about any of this, I know it's kind of a heated topic and that kind of thing. Ask Scott, ask me. We'd love to jump into this a little deeper at a different time. But it is 1:00 and I've mumbled on long enough.
One more thing.
One more thing.
Sam Maggio gives a class on why the birth of Christ, the Adam's blood did not enter into this scenario, which I think is really important. It was Mary's bloodline entered and God's bloodline. So Adam didn't enter into the picture. Very important message. If you ever get a chance to hear that, excellent.
There you go. Talk to Sam Maggio. Otherwise, I hope that you guys enjoy this beautiful summer afternoon. Absolutely, Don. Thank you for joining us again. I hope that it's been fruitful for y'all. But we will see you, if not Sunday, maybe next Tuesday. You guys have a great day.